Greetings to everyone. Let me formally introduce myself. I am Kimberly M. Sumabal and I will be a reporter for today. My first topic is about business letter. So what is a business letter? A business letter is a formal document or a letter written in formal language used when writing from one business organization to another or for correspondence between such organizations and their customers, clients, and other external parties. They are used for different purposes such as placing orders, making inquiries, making credit requests, requesting claims and adjustments, to apologize for a wrong, or simply to convey goodwill. Even today, they are very useful because it produces a permanent record. They are confidential, formal, and delivers persuasive, well-considered messages. There are 6 parts to a business letter. First is the heading. Heading goes at the top, usually with some letterhead design including a logo and possibly a company slogan. This part introduces you, the recipient, and includes important contextual information such as your name, job title, your address, phone number, email address, and of course the date you're penning the correspondence. Second part is the inside address. This is the address you are sending your letter to. You should make it as complete as possible. This part includes titles and names if you know them. In writing inside address, skip a line after the heading and then skip another line after inside address before the greetings. Third part is salutation or the greetings. The greeting in a business letter is always formal. It normally begins with the word dear and always include the person's last name and ended with a colon. Like for example, Dear Mr. Gaps or Dear Mrs. Monterona. Fourth part is the body. The body is the meat of your letter. This contains the message and this is where you write the details of your business letter. Start with a short introduction explaining why you are writing them. More than anywhere else, the general principle of communication applies. So your message must be clearly and succinctly said so that the reader will understand the message properly and quickly. Fifth part is the complimentary clause. This sign-off phrase shows your respect and appreciation for the person who is considering the request in your letter. Some good options for your formal closing includes respectfully yours and sincerely yours. But if your letter is less formal, consider using best wishes or thank you. Last part of business letter is the signature line. This line will include your first and last name and often includes a middle name or middle initial, although it is not required. You may put your title beforehand to show how you wish to be addressed, like Miss, Mrs., Mr., or Doctor. If you are printing this letter out and sending it by mail, you will sign your name using a pen. There are 3 main styles of business letter: the black style, modified semi-black style, and the full black style. Each is written in much the same way, including the same information, but the layout varies slightly for each one. So, black style letter. In this type of modified black letter, all the paragraphs line up at the left margin. You do not need to indent at all. The margin should be set to 1 to 1.5 inches all the way around the page. If you are using company letterhead, you will need to account for that in figuring the margin where the letterhead is placed on the page. As you can see in the example, there are 4 lines between date and letter address, 2 lines between letter address and salutation, and for the body, you only need a single space between sentences and leave an extra open line between each paragraphs. And then the 4 blanks between complementary closing and signature line. Next is the semi-black style letter. In this type, all the paragraphs line up at the left margin. However, the first word in each paragraph is indented. The margin should be set to 1 to 1.5 inches all the way around the page. If you are using company letterhead, you will need to account for that in figuring the margin where the letterhead is placed on the page. As you can see in the example, all paragraphs are indented and the author's address, date, and closing are usually indented in the same position. Lastly is the full black style letter. In a full black business letter, every component of the letter such as the heading, address, salutation, body, complementary close, and signature line are aligned to the left. Also, first sentences of paragraphs are not indented. The margin should be set to 1 to 1.5 inches all the way around the page. If you are using company letterhead, you will need to account for that in figuring the margin where the letterhead is placed on the page. My next topic is all about addressing of mails. When you send an email, it's important to have the right tone and attitude. Because of this, you need to open with a greeting that addresses the recipient appropriately. When you properly address someone in an email, it helps set the right tone for the rest of your message. In addition, it ensures the recipient reads the email rather than ignoring it. Using the right salutation and greeting can also influence future correspondence and help to establish a relationship between the recipient on the right note. So, how to address someone in an email? To select the right salutation for your email, you need to consider its recipient. If you know the recipient, you can get away with a more casual and friendly greeting, whereas if you're sending an email to someone you haven't known for a long time, it's best to use a formal greeting. So, here are some examples of how to start your email depending on the recipient. Standard salutation. Most often used in business correspondence, using a standard salutation shows your professionalism and respect. Consider using "Dear" in your email correspondence. You can use this salutation to address a wide range of recipients such as your professor or doctor. Next is friendly salutation. If you know someone personally, you can take a more casual and informal tone and use hi or hello. This salutation is commonly used if you send an email to your friend or to anyone that you personally know. And if you want to use a salutation that is both professional yet not too formal, you can use cordial salutation. You can use this salutation when you don't know the recipient that well or when you need to address a professor or manager. Like for example, good day, greetings, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Second, follow the salutation with their title and name. Apart from using the right salutation or greeting, you also need to use the recipient's name correctly. Once you know your relationship, you can determine how to address them using their name and title. If you know the recipient on a first name basis, use their first name after the salutation. This works well if you email your manager or co-worker. For example, you can address them as Dear Taylor or Hello Bob. But if you don't know the recipient well, use their appropriate title followed by their last name or their first and last name. For example, you can use Mr. Gaps or Mrs. Monterona. If you're unaware of their gender, use their full name such as Dear Jordan Jones, or if you know their gender but not their name, use Sir or Madam. For example, you can address them as Dear Sir or Dear Madam. The way you address someone in an email also depends on your specific relationship with the recipient. For example, the way you address a prospective employer differs from how you'd address your professor. So, here are some examples of how to address certain recipients. When you address a potential employer or manager, use Mr. or Miss followed by their last name. Only use Mrs. or Miss when you know their marital status. For example, you can address them as Dear Mr. Gaps or Dear Mrs. Tom. And when you address your professor, use dear followed by their last name. For example, Dear Mrs. Castillo. And when you address someone with a doctoral or medical degree, use doctor. Like for example, Dear Dr. Arcelias or Dear Dr. Monterona. Fourth is spell their name correctly. To verify the spelling of their name, check any documentation you have with their name and find their name online. Doing this shows you took the time to research how they spell their name. It also shows your attention to detail and professionalism. Lastly, capitalize and punctuate your salutation. After your greeting, add a comma or a colon. Typically, a comma is more suited for email correspondence as a comma is more formal. So here is an example of an email you can send to your male professor with the appropriate salutation. Dear Professor Roberts, comma. Good afternoon. As we discussed, I've attached my final report to this email. Let me know if you need anything else from me. Warm regards, Julia Barks. And here's an example of an email to a female prospective employer with the appropriate salutation. Dear Miss Albertson, it's come to my attention that you're currently hiring for the project manager role at Everly Incorporation based on the job description. I believe I'd make a great fit for the role. I've attached my resume and cover letter to this email. I look forward to your response. Warm regards, Noah Jennings. And that will be all for my report. Thank you for listening and have a good day.